afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City Commission workshop meeting this Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Commissioner Marker.
Here.
Vice Mayor Long.
Here.
Commissioner Cassell. Here. Deputy Vice Mayor Burns.
Here.
Mayor Carney.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. The first item on the workshop agenda is workshop item number 1. It's a request for the sponsorship of an amendment to the land development regulations. Do we need to read it here, or?
No, I think this is the first sponsorship that this commission has heard. So I just wanted to give you just a quick overview. Mr. Costello's here. He's going to make his request for an LDR text amendment. At least 3 of the commissioners must support the request in order for him to be able to submit an application. So we're not going to vote because it's a workshop, but if we get consensus from... It's nice.
Sorry. I'm trying to turn it down.
I gotta shut mine off now. You see that. So if we get consensus from 3 of you, then he'll be able to move his application forward.
Thank you. Okay. I guess does the applicant speak first?
Yes, sir.
So we
Yes.
would hold it like we do a regular thing?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Jeff Costello, JC Planning Solutions, representing the applicant, Wallace Drive LLC. So yes, this is a request for sponsorship. Before it is the LDR provision in 2.4.7. It was brought up at a prior City Commission meeting to put it on this agenda, and here we are. And so we're respectfully requesting the ability to move forward to amend the LI Zone District regulations to allow some more flexibility with regard to uses that are allowed. This map shows just the 2 areas in Delray Beach are zoned LI. It's about 17 acres total. Part of it within the Wallace Drive redevelopment area, which my client owns this property there. And so we're looking at the ability to allow some flexibility to allow service industry type uses within the LI, of course, contained within a building, and basically just adding this one provision to the LDRs. We feel that it's one of those providing that more flexibility. I think last week on your agenda you had another situation that allowed more flexibility along Congress, and this here would be the same. You know, there are the pressures with Live Local Act, and we feel that it would be supportive by the comp plan, especially as it relates to commerce. So at this time, we respectfully request the ability to move forward and submit the application.
Okay. To the city.
So we don't typically debate the requests very much back and forth. I mean, the request before you is really just to augment the allowable uses in LI. And I know that we are somewhat careful with the light industrial districts because there's only a few places where manufacturing and assembly and other types of uses are allowed. And so I think that the sort of the focus really should be that if allowing some of the contractor trade service uses, which I think certainly are not allowed as in too many places. This is part of what came up with the Congress Avenue discussion we had at the last meeting, whether that would be a good thing. But then, this also goes into other uses. I don't know that there's a big demand for repairing typewriters, which is one of our uses, which I promise I'm getting a consultant in to help us collapse our use categories.
Do we have saddle making included?
Yeah, exactly.
Buggy whip making is a biggie.
So right next to the abacus as well. And then a limousine service, which that type of storage and things like storing cars that are not currently active. There's not a ton of places for that, but then if that's just then inadvertently taking space at something else that is more truly industrial, could be taking. I think those are the only things that we would be really analyzing. I think, obviously this opens up to an indoor gun range, which is not a use that's in this district now either, which there may be a demand for, but I think, Jeff, if you don't mind, Mr. Costello, you go back to the map and show them the spots real quick. I'm sorry, he's got a better presentation.
Did I mess it up?
Having technical difficulty.
He's like, no, I've messed it up.
I knew I was going to mess it up. Here you go.
It's okay. I'm like,
And so obviously, like we do with all our proposals, we've worked with staff on moving this forward and address any concerns that may come up. As you know, with this Wallace Drive redevelopment area, what the LI was applied. There are some additional restrictions that apply from the MIC with regard to setbacks. And naturally, when you're next to residential, you have 50-foot building setbacks. But we felt this would be a situation where just to allow more flexibility as we look at a multi-tenant type of building.
And you're under no obligation to approve the amendment if you decide to have staff accept this and start the analysis and take it
Right.
through the usual planning board and the 2 ordinances. So if diversifying the uses a little bit in this area is something that is a reasonable request for staff to devote time to, that's part of why we have this process now, is so that you, of course, direct us fairly regularly to do changes to the code. And so when a private one comes in, that becomes the priority, the paying customer. And so whether or not this is worth I don't know, worth isn't the right word, but appropriate for us to accept and expend resources on analyzing. We know our industrial districts are, of course, shrinking. And I think Mr. Costello mentioned it, these are open to live local. So
Right.
doing some other diversification of commercial uses might be a benefit.
Could I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Could you go to the next slide, please, for me? Thank you. So, maybe that was the following, but when you talk about service industry uses defined in LDR section 4420B5, what is that? What are we looking to incorporate into this area that we don't currently have?
So, well, even the with regard to the LI, it says office, but like even the contractor and trade services, land development services, they aren't really specifically addressed. I know the repair of office equipment.
Because those would be under general commercial, right? You wouldn't put a
So it
land
really,
use attorney's office
you could-
in industrial because you technically want that use
And you-
to be utilized for industrial.
So in this here has, as you can see, these are allowed in the
Okay.
industrial and the MIC
Okay.
right now, these uses.
What are
But
you
they're more-
looking to
they're more
incorporate
office.
in, though, is what I'm asking you. What is your applicant looking to put in
So
that
it's
area?
we're currently looking at a variety, okay? So as we've been analyzing this, we have been looking at potential for of the office as well as a foundation office, which could be allowed, which may be allowed currently under the service, but also as a high-end private firearm training facility as well. So we're looking at these various options. They own the building. They want a multi-tenant type of building. Obviously, it's to compliance with the regulation. So that's what we're looking at this point. What they did want to provide are not currently really listed within the LI. They aren't a manufacturing type of facility. Obviously, we don't want to do self-storage, which is
Right.
allowed. So, but this would also generate a different additional activity within the district, and of course, contribute to the tax base.
So the way that the use groups work is what you see was the service industry uses is it's sort of that category of those uses that are listed by the bullet points that are already allowed when that group of uses
Is permitted.
is allowed.
Right.
So that group of uses right now is allowed in industrial.
Right.
But not
Right.
in light?
But not in the light industrial. And so since these uses have, and Mr. Costello's argument is that they're not more intensive, they're not particularly, like usually we sequester, right, the gunite that's gonna blow
Right,
and,
understood.
have an air quality issue separately. So this sort of group of uses, which is allowed in industrial, is not clearly allowed in light industrial. So if we think that they have a soft enough
Can
impact.
you amend that list to, in part, if we allow him to take the next step, if we accept the sponsorship, someone sponsors this and you move forward, he's looking for gun ranges, which actually seems like something that should be
Indoor.
permitted necessarily
Right.
there, right? But there's some of those things like maybe a bakery that I might say, we need to protect our land use. I don't know how much our light industrial is at the present moment, but it's not a lot.
Right.
Industrial is less than 2%. So while I would not be opposed to a gun range in that area, I also think we need to protect that resource because a land use is our resource. So I might be amenable to that, but not necessarily some of the other things. And that's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, we'll have that opportunity when
Can
the
we pick
application,
and
when
choose?
we
And-
create our list.
and
This
to
is
be-
just really to move it
Right.
forward,
I mean-
so he could
Apply,
either
we
bring
would work with staff, and then we could come back and further refine it. We thought this is much more broader,
Right?
and you probably not get a lot of bakeries that do want to go, but in any case, it was just to take exactly what's currently allowed in the industrial and actually MIC and allow it right there. Now,
And could
we
you
could
not
further
go-
refine it, but then we'd probably individual list it, get more specific.
Well, and in this case, it's not a retail bakery, right? It's not.
Right. It says
this
food
is like
prep
you're baking
processing,
the bread and
including
then
but limited not to.
right, and then but you're actually doing the prep there, so that you're making the food product, and then you're probably
Taking
have
it.
trucks coming in to then take them around to other places, which has
It's-
a bigger impact than just a retail shop where we go and buy a
And-
croissant and
an example.
have a happy day. You know,
Old
So-
school bread on Congress Avenue, just
Yeah.
north of Atlantic.
That's a
They
good
deliver to all the restaurants
Right.
here, and they use, so that's an example.
I don't object to this.
Okay, Commissioner Long, anything?
No, I think this makes sense, and that's why I supported it. I think, especially given how few parcels we have left that are light industrial, I think adding some flexibility there is going to help us keep them light industrial instead of, getting absorbed by someone coming in with live local. And I think, yeah, as long as we can sort of curate this list during the analysis a little bit, make sure we got, saddle companies there or whatever we want to have. No, I think this just makes sense right now, especially given what some of the stuff we went over at the last meeting with adjusting MROC. This seems to be in line with that, so I'm supportive.
Commissioner Burns?
No, I don't have any questions. I think that I'm ready to support it. Just if you have any typewriter repair shops, I have one. It was literally ripped from my hands to force me into using a computer, so I still have it in my garage. So let me know.
Love it.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner,
I'm supportive. Anything to help Angela's typewriter problem out.
yeah, I'm for flexibility and trying to preserve our industrial zones. This is a list, but maybe we'll think of some other things in the
Yeah.
process that we want to add to that list
Yeah.
as a permitted use. So
Okay.
I think we should, this is just to move it forward, and I think we got all five of us here saying,
Yeah.
good
Thank
to
you.
go.
Appreciate it. Have a great meeting.
Thanks, Jeff.
Mr. Mayor, let me kick it off.
Okay, kick it off.
Introduce.
Maybe I'll get my typewriter next.
We have the workshop item number 2. In front of us, we have our Chief Financial, Mr. Dokowitz, but Mr. Moore, our city manager, is going to lead us off and go through this presentation, and
Thank you,
Rob.
Mr. Mayor.
yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of today's workshop meeting as it relates to the proposed budget consideration for the upcoming fiscal year provides an opportunity for both the Office of the City Manager and that of Chief Financial Officer Henry Dakowitz to help showcase the great deal of revenue and expenditure analysis that have been achieved during the past couple months in an effort to achieve a balanced budget recommendation. Although the proposed budget recommendation for fiscal year 2025-2026 is imminent for formal consideration during the July 8th, 2025 workshop meeting 4 weeks from now, we thought it would be productive to share with the City Commission what steps have been made to achieve a balanced budget consideration on a preliminary basis. Interestingly enough, this was a bit of a challenge, of course, considering that the one major operational change anticipated effective October 1, 2025 relates to the Fire Rescue Department, in that the City of Delray Beach, the Delray Beach Fire Rescue Department will transition from a 24/48 operational shift structure to that of 24/72, 24 hours on, 72 hours off. That was the result of a contractual obligation having been made in the most recent collective bargaining agreement going back to 2023. As we prepare for that particular consideration, and we've talked a little bit about this before a few months ago, there are some financial impacts in that regard. Of course, there is expectations that we do what we can to maintain the current EMS structure of 3-3, and quite frankly, perhaps the greatest operational challenge or proposed budget review and consideration challenge involve striking a balance to achieve all of it, 2472 while maintaining an EMS position of 3.3. Interestingly enough, the financial position or structure of the city of Delray Beach, Florida, is not such that it is that straightforward. Much of that was confirmed via an analysis of other municipalities that have made the transition to 2472 while supporting a 3.3 EMS structure. Municipalities, including our neighboring communities to the north and to the south, as well as in other parts of Broward County, Palm Beach County, have public safety assessments, fire assessments, call them what you will, to help support general fund revenue outcomes to assist in those operations moving forward. That is a function of the marketplace, and frankly, again, ladies and gentlemen, that's not the case in the city of Delray Beach, Florida, which necessitates a frank discussion as part of the preliminary proposed budget process as we prepare formal recommendations to be initiated next month. Interestingly enough, as well, is the fact that the Fire Rescue Department, working closely with the Office of the City Manager, working closely with the Department of Finance, did an excellent job in terms of identifying efficiencies in operations. We previously shared with you all some of what that looks like so that we can, in fact, be prepared to do what we can to get to the absolute best place possible as far as being able to support that particular outcome. Despite that, there still is a need for about a $1.4 million outcome contribution in some way. And to that effect, we did consider a couple different options to get to that place. Number one, the review and analysis concerning an assessment program. However, as we've updated the PowerPoint presentation to accompany this afternoon's presentation, that will take time to accomplish. In other words, fiscal impact analysis would legally have to be satisfied to help determine what something like that would look like for the city of Delray Beach, Florida. Therefore, City Commission, we do not believe, is in position to entertain that particular consideration in time for October 1, 2025, or fiscal year 2025-2026, because there's legal processes and steps we must execute to get to a place of offering specific recommendations. It's not via the simple proposed budget process as we are discussing at this particular point in time. However, there are other thoughts and considerations as to how we get to that place. Frankly, I've had discussions with a couple of y'all individually about different ways in which ambulance services can in fact be provided. Well, given the current structure of an internal emergency medical service program, as well as the transition from 2448 to 2472, our considerations that are being presented today are based on that present environment. I'm not at liberty to come up with other scenarios because they do not yet exist for the city of Delray Beach, nor is it guaranteed that any transitions would in fact take place. So we will have a few comments towards the end of this formal presentation, but in the meantime, I'd like to give Chief Financial Officer Henry Dacquist the opportunity to summarize how we got to a place in which we can offer a balanced budget consideration outside the variables that I just spoke about as it relates to the fire rescue operation.
Could I ask one question, Mayor?
Sure.
We got that request to revisit the contract, the demand. In light of that, we don't even know, I mean, in our discussion in private, should we be discussing the fire department staffing levels publicly at this point in time in light of the fact that we might be discussing them? It doesn't matter? Okay,
I don't think so either, because if I may, Commissioner, and that's an excellent point, and I do appreciate it. Nevertheless, the focus is fiscal, financial, and this is the time for City Commission to be brought up to speed across the board, and I think it's a safe avenue in which to do so. Otherwise, a very fair observation. I appreciate that. Nevertheless, I think we're in good company. Mr. Dacquist, so your presentation will be fairly succinct as far as what the aggregate requests had been, those of what you've experienced during the months of April and May, and how we got to a place in which we can offer a balanced budget consideration based on the existing millage rate. But again, we do need to address the question relative to additional financial considerations regarding the fire rescue piece as well as the EMS structure. Mr. Dacquist, if you would please.
Thank you. This first slide was our basis, looking at the current year, 2025 amended budget, and this was done as of May of 2025. And then looking at the requests for the 2026 budget. You had all of those workshops, you interacted with the departments directly. Both the city manager and I met with the departments, and this was the net result of the expectations. So the amended budget was $189.2 million, and the budget request, the projection is $177.9 million, which is an $11.3 million negative gap. Much of that is because the amended budget includes $10 million of drawdown from reserves. So when we did the baseline for 2026, we excluded that. And that's most of the $11.3 million shortfall on the revenue side. On the expense side, we were at $189.22 million, looking at $201.8 million projected for 2026, another $12.6 million negative shortfall, where the projected expenses are larger than our current amended budget, for a total of gap of $23.9 million. Looking at the individual departments, the police department is going from $50.3 million to $58.99 million. That includes the cost out of the most recent city proposal to the police department in our negotiations. So that's our standard. Obviously, that may change with a final agreement, but that's the placeholder that we're using right now, and that's why that's an increase of $8.68 million. As City Manager Moore referred, the fire department this year is $49.22 million, and the request is $50.4 million. I will tell you, I was in the preliminary discussions of the impact of moving from 2448 to 2472, and it was many more millions higher. The amount of staff required, et cetera, was enormous. Chief Ron Martin, in consultation with City Manager Moore and myself, found other cuts and adjustments such that their net increase is only $1.2 million. It could have been much higher. Third would be Parks and Recreation. This current year it's $12.95 million. Right now it's $14.6 million. In discussions with Sam Matat, he said there are two major reasons for that. $800,000 is due to increase in salaries and benefits and other payroll costs, and $900,000 due to water rates. We've talked about the fact that the water plant, Hassan, has increased rates. Our Parks Department is the biggest user of the water in our city. So that those two items netted to $1.7 million. We have $1.65 listed here. The other, and those three departments account for $11.53 million of the total $12.6 million gap, or 91.4%. So that's what we started with as a challenge. Any questions?
I do, if I may. The fire number concerns me because while I understand what you're saying is we found ways to cut, that increase doesn't, last year we did this, and this, is your first full year. But last year we had given about $8 million to the fire department and about $1 million to the police department. And we saw that didn't work. We knew going into it that wasn't sufficient to continue the level of service that we needed in that department. So while I appreciate that we've found cuts, I want to make sure that we didn't find them for the sake of the presentation to us, but that that we actually are not going to come back mid-year for a big budget adjustment. Because what we do all the time is we say we can keep our reserves at this percentage, but really we go into it using numbers that allow us to believe we're keeping our reserves there. And then we have these budget amendments, and then we're jumping into our reserves. And then at the end, sometimes we do not take our encumbered money and roll it over so our reserves still look good. But really and truly, is that enough money in light of the current amount of money they need and in light of the contract that we know exists that requires everybody to have a minimum of a 5% increase? How is this possible? How is this number possible?
Commissioner, our goal is to not accomplish what you just, the basis of your concerns. So that's why we are
That's
expressing.
historically been the way we've done it, though.
Well, moving forward, we adhered accordingly, and we've done what we could to not allow that to be the case. Thus, our projections in terms of what the fund balance position would be, and all involved working diligently to get to that place so that we can offer this communication. So one of my charges to Mr. Dakowitz when he was brought on board effective December 9, 2024, was that we do what we can to be as upfront as we possibly can so as to help minimize any adjustments to that effect unless it's the result of favorable revenue outcomes that had not been the case or had not been originally forecast. So that's what we're working to accomplish. And again, spending the past couple months with one another to get to a place such that we can be confident in the position that we've shared. That is why we are where we are. Outside of the aforementioned dialogue relative to the transition from 2448 to 2472 and what comes with that, all else I think is quite well. And Chief Martin will affirm in his commentary later on what Mr. Dakowitz and I have just shared. So I think we're fine, and we do not anticipate the need to engage in further adjustments or liberal adjustments, if you will, to the point you just shared relative to previous concerns, thus us forecasting up front what we think the fund balance position will be on a preliminary basis as we prepare for recommendations for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, thank
I think
you.
Chief Martin will address those in more detail.
Okay, as we go along.
Yes,
as we go
ma'am.
along. Okay,
Thanks, I appreciate that.
thank you. The next slide is our proposed solution. So item 1 is additional projected ad valorem revenues due to increase in the total assessed values, but based on current millage rate. One of the guidelines was, excuse me, no increase in millage rate. But we did get some preliminary numbers from the Palm Beach County Assessor, and based on continuing our current millage rate to next year with the increased assessed values and taking into account homestead limitations, we're looking at an increase of $8.5 million. Vacancies. Vacancies are always available at a certain point in time. We took the vacancies as of May 27th, which was $4.74 million. And what we said is, we can't afford full funding of all vacancies. Now, good managers use that as a cushion. They're not going to hire maybe the total amount. They may not hire them all on the first day of the year. So there's a little bit of cushion that's always in there when you have vacancies. We said we have a very big gap to fill. So we are saying that we are going to take the amount of vacancies and take 50% out of the budget. So it closes the gap, but it reduces the margin of error. We don't have a lot of room that we normally would have if we funded the full vacancy. So that is $2.37 million. Now on September 30th, 4741 may not be the number of vacancies. It may be higher, it may be lower, but we're using this as the placeholder for right now. Number 3, attrition, and I believe we've done this in prior years, that there's a certain amount of attrition in each department. We're looking at fire, police, and park and recs with a 3% attrition rate, and all other departments 1% attrition rate. So if we have attrition, meaning people leave the employ of the city and they are not replaced, we would have a savings. We took $1.78 million in salaries, 136,000 in FICA expenses, and so we got a total of 1.9 million, which helps plug the gap of the 23.9 million.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So numbers 2 and 3 are somewhat aligned. So with the attrition number, we're assuming someone's leaving and we are not replacing that body, period.
Correct.
So it's not being slipped into the vacancy budget.
No, two separate things we don't want to double count.
That's what I was worried about.
So we have existing vacancies. So let's say someone has a department with 10 vacancies.
Uh-huh.
We're assuming the cost of filling 5 of those, but maybe it's partial years, maybe it's 8 people for a partial year,
Okay.
that the total cost would be replacing 5 of them
Okay.
on a dollar value. Attrition is taking the existing people on the payroll that normally turn over and will not become a vacancy. It will not get filled.
Okay, I got it.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Can I ask a question about those 2 items as well? And forgive me if I'm misunderstanding, but don't vacancies and attrition lead to more overtime? Because we have mandatory shift requirements for both police and fire. So wouldn't there be an overtime cost increase associated with these 2 variables somewhere?
Depends on the departments.
Right.
Okay, but we're working with vacancies as of now. So that's the run rate. So if you think about it, we're not doing anything worse. We're just saying that next year, we're not going to fill all the vacancies, or the dollar impact would only be half. So I think the overtime is already included in the baseline run
That's
rate.
correct.
And what about the cost of training whenever we do eventually fill these roles? I know that's going to be offset to the following year.
Well, we have line items for training, and it's already been in there. We're not touching
So
that.
that's already buried in the
Separate line item. Good
Got it.
questions, though. Thank you.
understood. Thank you.
Okay. Non-personnel expenses. We just have a huge gap, and vacancies and attrition attacked, I think it's 70% of our costs are personnel related, and that's what we attacked first. But we're saying that gap was too large, so we looked at non-personnel expenses, which are requested, and we're saying we're going to reduce them in each department by 5%. That would be a 3.96 save or closing of the gap.
I actually had asked Mr. Moore on this particular line item earlier today. Could you articulate what you mean by what you just said?
What I mean by what I said? Yes. When we look at expenses in each department, they're usually in 3 or 4 categories. The first are personnel costs, payroll, overtime, payroll taxes, benefits. It's all in the payroll grouping.
Right.
The next grouping are operating expenses.
Yep.
Then there are sometimes capital expenditures, and there may be 1 or 2 others. What we're saying is, we got to the payroll expenses through vacancies and attrition. We want to get to the other expenses,
Which is your operational costs and things.
the
such as-
operation, the
okay.
non-payroll
clarify that.
operational costs. Think of it that way.
Just wanted to
May I ask
clarify
a
that.
question, Mayor? But I believe in looking at the worksheets, and forgive me because it was a bit ago, the insurance went up almost in every department by approximately 35%, right?
Are you talking health insurance?
Life, health, but that comes under that subcategory that is not included in the top section, which is your direct payroll, your holiday pay, and the like. That's a substantial increase in each of those, in almost every department. What are we taking away? I mean, that's in the scheme of the budget. You could argue 3.9 million, 4 million isn't really a lot. But specifically, what are you taking away? What is that 5% reduction? Are you just going to every department and saying, figure out a way to pull
Here's a
5?
negative item in your budget. It says, yes, you have a line item budget, line by line,
Yeah.
but you have to come up with a surplus, if you will, on your expenditures to get to that 5% reduction. I'm not going to identify. One department may use conferences and travel. One may use other types of expenses.
Yeah, we're taking a lot away from our staff in this recommendation.
No
But
question.
I know, and I'm a little concerned about it, frankly. another question I have for you, going back to slide 1, we got all these amazing presentations from our staff about what they needed to maintain the level of service. Are those numbers that you have up there, the level of service numbers, or current? Because then there was also the request, right? So we got this is the minimum we can all function with, and here's what we'd love as a bonus if we can get it. What numbers are you giving us on that first slide?
We took all of the requests,
Right.
and then we came up with that as the
The
total.
request inclusive of what they were asking for in addition? Because every department
Well, you
did a
say
really...
in addition, level of service is
There
a
was a
code
level
word
of
for
service-
increase.
Correct.
Okay.
There were...
We took the requests
Yes.
plus the request for level of service
That's what I'm asking. So
increases.
everything they were asking for on those days is inclusive in that.
We're saying
Yes, to answer
Thank
the
you.
question
that's
is yes.
that's the number that's requested, and
That's
that's why
what
we
I-
had such a big gap.
Right.
Exactly. Thus I said yes.
And I was going to say, as a finance professional, cutting vacancies 50%, cutting attrition 1 to 3%, and cutting non-personnel expenses by 5% will close the gap, but gives us very little margin of error.
Yeah,
Again,
it's
my
concerning.
mandate was no increase in millage rate. I have never been
Who gave you that
in a
mandate? We
situation-
haven't had that mandate. This commission did not give that mandate.
It's not a mandate. If I may, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we were operating in.
Excuse me 1 second, Mr. Moore. I think what you're tasked with doing is telling us what millage we need to apply to get to where we reasonably need to be.
That's not how you budget. You don't just do your wish list
Well,
and
you
raise your
can't.
millage.
No,
You
no.
back in-
I
you create a
I
millage and
agree.
you back into it with expenses.
No, I think
I'm
Miss-
sorry.
you are
That's-
allowed, Mayor, excuse me, first of all, I'm speaking.
Well, you're speaking the whole time.
Second, no, I'm not speaking the whole time. I'm asking questions that are, I think, reasonable.
And you're getting an answer, and you work on
let
it
me
again.
try to
I mean,
answer.
we're
Let me
covering
try
the
to
same
answer.
We
ground
don't know
twice.
what millage to apply until we know what our expenses are.
Let me,
Our mistake in the past, Mr. Dakowitz, has been to randomly apply a millage rate and then tell our staff, figure out how to work with this. And it didn't really necessarily work because then they came back for budget amendment
Let-
after budget amendment.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, City Manager Moore and I worked on a set of assumptions to develop a recommendation for a budget that would be balanced. And this is our approach and our recommendation. Obviously, this is not final.
Thank you.
Which
So
is why we're here.
consequently, if all you good folks decide to increase the millage rate, we can calculate how much that would increase our revenues.
Right.
And we can alter the other items in an offsetting manner to balance the budget. But these were the guidelines. This is the city manager's recommendation.
Well, that would have been something you should have come out and asked, because typically we see 3 scenarios where you have where you're currently at, then you might have a slight increase, another increase, and another. So we can work within the numbers, because frankly, I'm very concerned about what you're presenting here in terms of what that means for our residents and what kind of training are we taking away from our staff. Is that a good idea? And pulling from the reserves, I voted no in the last budget for that reason. I do not like the fact that we are consistently pulling from our reserves to balance our day-to-day operations. But thank you, I'll let you continue.
Mr. Mayor, before we allow Mr. Dakowitz to continue, I'd like to ask that you specifically or explicitly talk a little bit about the true definition of reserves versus fund balance from an accounting standpoint. I think it's important that that is
Okay.
clarified so that we can be squared away in this regard.
Absolutely. If I can compare government financial statements to general commercial financial statements, when a general business has an operation, they have revenues minus expenses, and they have net income or profit.
Right?
That profit is then owned by the corporation, and the way it goes from the income statement to the balance sheet, it becomes what's called retained earnings. It's capital. Capital goes into a company 2 ways. One, by the investors putting in money, and the other is profits that are retained in the business.
Right.
And it's all available, it's all one bucket.
Understood totally.
In government, we have revenues minus expenses, and we have a surplus. The surplus is going into reserves on our balance sheet. However, in government accounting, the reserves are put into different categories. They may be reserved. They may be restricted.
Right.
They may be, I forget the others. This is unrestricted,
Fund balance.
undiscretionary appointed. It's what's left with discretion. In my prior positions, I called that the rainy day fund.
Right.
The rainy day fund might be used, God forbid, a hurricane in Florida, or up north, we had COVID. I think you had it here too. So the point is, it's very unusual. It's reserves for the very unfortunate circumstances that are not usually day to day. And yes, reserves are not normally used for day-to-day
Exactly.
operating expenses. So when I do use the term reserves, please understand
I
I'm
understand.
using unrestricted, undesignated, unallocated and specified for other purposes. It's what's left with total discretion. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
May I
And
ask
That
a,
helps.
may I ask a
I'm
quick-
sorry?
That helps.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question here, circling back to millage rate? Had we adopted the millage rate that our city manager had proposed at the time last year, which was 6.0611, would we be facing this $1.4 million shortfall that we're looking at within our fire department budget?
The 1.4 in the fire department.
I believe what you're referring to is the $1.4 million additional calculation required if policy direction was to proceed with the 42472
To keep our 3-3
and to
staffing
maintain a
model.
3-3 position. That's later in the presentation. So I think
But
you
we're talking about millage, and I want to understand.
Let me try to explain. Our ad valorem taxes are the product of the total assessed value times a millage rate with some funky calculations for homestead, which says you don't pay more than 3%.
Yep.
Okay? So if the millage rate went up last year, we would have had more funds. We would have run a bigger surplus, or we would have drawn down funds from reserve last year less than what we did. So it's, think about commercial. Higher profit, more money goes into the balance sheet, and when it's on the balance sheet, it could be used for the next year. So you're saying this year's 1.4, we might have had more resources available to use if it wasn't used in other operations for the current year.
That's my question, because we adopted a 5.9063 rollback millage rate.
Right.
Instead of the recommended rate, which was 6.0611. I'm wondering what the difference is in that.
Next slide,
What's
we
the
have it.
budget difference?
Next slide, we have
Because
that.
if we don't acknowledge the difference between those two things, and the fact that that may have been a mistake, how do we move forward with rectifying that issue? Is my question. I
yeah.
think that Commissioner Casale is correct that
Okay.
if we're not discussing raising our millage going forward, I don't know how we realistically address this issue without severely compromising our level of service.
I appreciate that, and obviously I'm familiar with the rollback last year. I came in December, and I've been working with, here are the books and records now. There were certain things that contributed to this, and I'm just trying to move forward. But obviously,
Yep.
you're raising a very big issue that there's a cause and effect.
Correct.
If we have a rollback rate, it affects what happened or what's happening in this current year.
Yes. Thank you.
Fair enough, thank you. Okay. Travel and training. This goes back to John Mainville in my department. I'm going to call it the Delray Beach Doge operation,
please
where
don't.
he's been looking at travel and training for a while. He says we have conferences where 5 people, each in their own car, drive to Orlando. They have certain expenses. We should be able to cut those expenses. He's been working on a change in policy, and we said maybe this is the year and the timing for that. And when we did the calculation, we said, okay, if we reduced police and fire travel and training by 10% and 40% in other departments, we would come up with $245,000. In the big scheme of the budget, it's small, but I think from a policy point of view of trying to eliminate and reduce waste, it's an excellent way of thinking. After we did all of those things, we still were short by 6.9 million as a gap. So the proposal and recommendation is draw down from reserves, those unspecified, already accounted for reserves of 6.9 million. And that way we would have 23.9 million in saves, which offset the 23.9 million in shortfall. Okay? Next, let's talk about the fund balance because it's critical. Unassigned fund balance, unrestricted, as of the end of fiscal year 24, according to the presentation by CBIZ a week ago, we're at $50.8 million. We project, sitting here today, but by the end of fiscal year 2025, that we would reduce reserves by 4.2 million. It's a projection. It could change. It could be higher, it could be lower. But if that comes true, then the year-end balance unassigned will be 46.6 million. With our recommendation of a budget where we're looking at 6.9 something, call it 7 million drawdown of reserves, we would end up next year at the end of the year at $39.6 million. And that, going along with this slide, is this calculation. We do have a fund balance policy for the unassigned, unrestricted, uncommitted reserves. And so the unassigned fund balance at the end of next year would be 39.6 million from the prior slide. And the amount of the expenses, based on the city manager recommended proposal today after the changes, would be $193.3 million. The ratio would be 21%, which conforms to the low range of our current fund.
It's actually 20.5%.
What is that?
20.5 is the actual number.
And when you-
39.6 million is
When
20.5.
you round, that's 21%.
No, it's not when you round.
We don't round?
It's 20.5. It's below 21.
I don't know where I come from when you don't have a decimal.
20.50. It's still below. It's below the ratio it should be.
It's
Thank you.
20.5%, but I don't know that we calculate everything to the,
Well, I mean, if it's our policy to be at 21 or above, if it's below, even by a tenth of a point, it's below. So we're below our required ratio through our comprehensive plan. That's a concern. But the question is, so the 193 is the 201 minus the recommended slide that you
Changes
had,
to the
all the
expenses.
vacancies, the training, the attrition, and wow. Okay, thank you.
okay?
Mr. Dacquis, I'll take the next part.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I more or less began talking a little bit about this during the introductory comments for today's presentation. The state of affairs in the Delray Beach Fire Rescue Department, the transition from 2448 to 2472 effective October 1 of this year, and the dynamics associated with EMS structure of 3. We clarified previous discussions, and again this afternoon, that unlike most municipalities, or many municipalities, the city of Delray Beach does not support a fire assessment or public safety assessment in any kind, which in the other municipalities, it contributes to the general fund to assist with those types of opportunities and dynamics. So recognizing that, not to mention the fact that the city of Delray Beach would have to engage in a fairly involved fiscal impact analysis process to determine what that might be, the city of Delray Beach will not be in position to make direction to that effect, even if it desired to do so at this particular point in time. So that brings us to the thoughts and questions relative to the millage rate. In the event that there was some interest in doing whatever we possibly can, the $1.4 million difference that Mr. Lone talked about in his presentation a little while ago and his question a little while ago would be a function of a millage adjustment from the current 5.9063 to 6.0039. And it's unavoidable, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to take under consideration the city's revenue position to get to that place. Quite frankly, when direction was previously offered to make the transition from 2448 to 2472, we were pretty open that was not staff's initial recommendation, because of course that was not in line with the financial structure of the city of Delray Beach, Florida, unlike many other municipalities that do employ or levy a fire assessment or a public safety assessment. So at this point in time, given the fact that this transition is to become effective October 1, 2025, City Commission is at liberty to offer its thoughts and directions so that we can get to the place of addressing what possibilities might exist. Above and beyond that particular point, I think it's also important for Fire Chief Ronald Martin to come before the City Commission to discuss a couple other considerations, one of which having to do with the SAFER grant. There was recent written communication as to what that might look like, as well as City Commission did express an interest in learning a little bit more about that. Given the connection to the proposed budget consideration, it's productive, I think, to have a dialogue to that effect here. However, before we engage in that regard, it's important to point out and clarify that SAFER is a very, very competitive proposition.
Did you send us that information? Because I asked for that at the last meeting, and I didn't see it in my inbox.
I don't believe we have as of yet. We will begin today.
Okay.
So thank you. And again, it makes sense as part of this budget dialogue so that the commission can have a public understanding as to what that looks like. Again, SAFER is a very competitive proposition. We're getting our arms around this over the last couple of days into the weekend in terms of what this might look like so that we can begin the process of providing that background information. So in an effort to be as thorough as we possibly can, we are here today, and of course we'll continue to share information in writing at the conclusion of this evening's dialogue.
And real quick on the SAFER grant, what is the cutoff to get that submitted? How long do we have?
The deadline is actually in the next couple of weeks, so if there's any interest to engage a submission, an authorization would have to take place rather quickly, no later than by the next meeting. However,
Okay.
it's a very competitive proposition, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 9% success rate nowadays.
What is the staffing level requirement? Because that was the issue
I'm going to have
last
him
time
speak
we
about
had.
that. Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
that's part of the presentation. We understand that, and Chief Martin, if you can please come forward to offer your presentation to that effect, to include the previous questions having been raised by the commission, as well as your being empowered to provide written communication post haste.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So in your packets, you have the two options that I'm going to discuss, the SAFER grant and the adjustment to the fire suppression coverage.
Before you continue, Chief, I did not mention the piece relative to adjustment to fire suppression coverage. So my interest was to talk about the SAFER grant first, followed by what that means. So I think we'll have to offer a couple introductory remarks as a potential sole remaining possibility to help address the 3-3 consideration.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So obviously, you guys are familiar with the SAFER grant. For those of you who may not be, this is a FEMA grant opportunity to communities to enhance the number or maintain the number of certified firefighters in local communities. As Mr. Moore alluded to, this is a very competitive process. Departments who are applying for SAFER grants typically start this process in January of the year that they're intending to apply. This is an extremely competitive process. $324 million is available this fiscal year with $3 billion of requests that are already in. We have a success rate of less than 9% for this grant. We have 2 weeks to put it together based on approval from the City Commission. The string, so to speak, of what's attached to this grant is we have to fund positions that are not part of today's baseline staffing. The city must retain these people that we would hire with the SAFER grant for the grant period, which is 3 years. This is a cost-sharing grant, which means year one and year two, we would receive 75% of a first-year firefighter's salary. The city would be responsible for 25%. The third year, the city would be responsible for 65%, and we would get 35% of a first-year firefighter loaded salary. Now, I make that distinction. We have collective bargaining that's coming up next year. We have step raises that will come in through the grant funding period. So the city's cost share will incrementally increase through the grant period, because this will only provide funding for that first year firefighter salary. There's obviously, like with every other grant, there's federal reporting requirements that we'll have to do through the term of the grant. Now, some other things. Obviously, we have a new presidential administration. So we need to comply with all executive orders related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will have to agree to comply with all presidential executive orders. We need to be able to paint a very clear demonstration of what the local financial need is for this grant. And we also have to provide some type of sustainability, because FEMA wants to see these positions maintained and sustained and stay in the local community once the grant period ends. Again, this is a very competitive process. Less than 9% of the applications are actually awarded and receive funding. So that concludes my presentation on SAFER, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chief Martin. And the one remaining opportunity, again, we've been all working feverishly to come up with ways to identify efficiencies in operations to be as whole as we possibly can. A couple of you have shared with me, getting back to the 3 EMS position versus that of 3-2. You talked a little bit about management abilities, what our capacity is with respect to operations in that regard. Nevertheless, it does have a bit of an implication, because of course there's the potential for bargaining those types of adjustments and considerations, and therefore my assertion that the City Commission needs to be aware of those possibilities moving forward, because ultimately that would potentially touch the City Commission in terms of any feedback, guidance, direction, policy considerations that may be born in that regard. Likewise, literally working into the weekend, getting our thoughts together with respect to how we can address that particular consideration with minimal impacts, pardon me. Mr. Martin, Chief Martin, was able to offer considerations relative to adjustments to fire suppression coverage to help offset human resources so that we can maintain a 3-3 position until such time some other avenue is made available. So on that note, Chief Martin, if you would be so kind to share your thoughts and considerations.
Before we move on, I just have a quick question about the SAFER grant. And I don't mean this in an accusatory way. This is a genuine question. Why did we only learn about this grant 2 weeks before it's due when folks are applying for it way back in January? Now we're kind of behind the 8 ball.
Oh, we were aware of the SAFER grant. I mean, I'm aware of several grant opportunities.
Why were we not aware?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, given the associated requirements, dynamics, concerns associated with the administration, not to mention the slim margin of success rate, it was not on our radar to even contemplate a recommendation in that regard until such time we delved into the proposed budget process in terms of identifying efficiencies in operations. It literally came up for us as a potential focus given the respective budget analysis or revenue impact analysis to help us address these particular concerns. So a few months ago, it really, truthfully, was not a focus of the city of Delray Beach because it wasn't necessary at the time. 1, 2, exploring any and every opportunity we can to be as whole as we possibly can given the current EMS structure is why we took that under consideration over the last week or two.
I'll be honest, I find it a bit troubling that we're only considering grant opportunities whenever we're backed into a corner financially and out of desperation.
And generally, we do not do that. Generally, that's not the case. Generally, that is not what we do. Anytime there's a grant opportunity in which there's minimal impact to the city financially, operationally, we're pretty assertive about pursuing those opportunities. SAFER grant is very unique for the reasons both Chief Martin and I spoke about, and therefore is not an automatic benefit to the city of Delray Beach. It does come with requirements, conditions, and a definitive future commitment beyond a 3-year window, as having just been discussed by Chief Martin.
I understand, but perhaps in the future that could be up for the commission to debate the potential burdens of a grant earlier on in the process so we can establish in a timely fashion if it's something we want to pursue.
Fair enough.
Rather than trying to objectively weigh the pros and cons of this grant opportunity when it's not only a Hail Mary in terms of whether we can even get it, but now we kind of need it. And now I have to go out and consider my position when I talk to residents. And the only out I see out of this situation is to raise millage, frankly, to not compromise our level of service under this new contractually mandated schedule. And I'm going to have a hard time saying to residents that we didn't consider every other option to try and save money from the city's perspective, even if it is a Hail Mary, even if it does burden us with certain things. I can't go out and tell residents, we're going to raise your taxes, but we didn't even try and apply for a grant that could have somewhat mitigated that.
We're not
So-
suggesting that we don't have the capacity. If the commission had an interest in authorizing us pursuing this opportunity, we would be in position to do so.
Well, I think we have to at this point, is what I'm
If
getting
there
at.
was some interest in do so. However, before getting to that place, if I may, Vice Mayor, I was simply doing what I can to explain the rationale we employed financially, fiscally, administratively, as to why we are where we are in that regard. It was initially, months ago, not a particular focus for the right reasons. However, getting into the proposed budget process, exploring every avenue with respect to the EMS structure and all other related considerations, we did offer a specific focus, and the city of Delray Beach does have experience administering and procuring successfully safer
Listen,
grant programs.
I get it, and I'm not. My goal here isn't to cast blame. It's
No,
just
sir.
it's just to try and avoid situations like this going forward. A confluence of events led us here, and I'm not thrilled with the position that we're in right now.
Yes,
it's
sir.
dicey at best, and I think we have very few options before us. And despite the burdens that this grant does carry with it, I think we pretty much have to apply for it. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just, I forgot my question, actually. But just my short time being here, I thought that we always look for outside revenue sources to supplement.
We do.
I thought that was a regular. Chief Martin, thank you. What is
Were
the
you finished-
feasibility?
Were you finished with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well,
Making
this portion, yes.
He's finished with this grant. I just wanted to know, what is the feasibility of the city of Delray applying for this grant at this time with the late, like, do we have a chance, do we have the personnel or the means to get the application in a timely manner so that we're considered for it?
Ma'am, considering the service implications, I can assure you that if we're authorized for this grant, we will absolutely give it our best shot.
Okay,
I can guarantee you that commitment.
all right, and
Thank you.
are there any penalties for submitting and not getting it? Is there
No,
any?
no, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have one other question. So the SAFER grant only funds employees that we currently don't have.
That's correct.
Correct. So we know we need to go out and hire to make the 2472 work.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
was approved in the last union contract. How many employees do we need to hire to make the 2472 work? How many, was it 10?
We originally started with 22 positions.
Right.
Working cooperatively with our labor partners in close agreement with the Office of the City Manager. We took that obligation from 22 positions down to 15 positions.
So you hire 15. The first year they're covered, the second year there's a sharing, and the third year there's another
Third-
sharing, and then the fourth year we pay in full. And we're guaranteeing to keep on our current number plus the additional 15 for eternity.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, just to recap, so year one is 75-25.
Right.
Year two is 75-25. Year three is 65-35.
65-35.
That's the position the city will be in. And your cost will continue to escalate as they move through, if there's COLA raises, if there's contractual raises, step raises.
At rises.
Yeah.
I think you have to apply for the grant. Are there any other issues? I know that if say for something dramatic happened and we terminate some of those 15, I think we would owe the money back.
Yes, ma'am.
That's my recollection. Is there anything else in there that we should be aware of before giving you direction to move forward?
A lot of the local municipalities, obviously, we know we have a new presidential administration.
That's the
A lot of
biggest
local,
concern.
lot of local communities have heartburn over some of those presidential executive orders. So they make the local condition that they're going to avoid federal grants where they can. that seems to be the hottest topic that I've been able to identify.
That could present large issues for the city in light of some of the things people want to do up here. But I honestly think, with consideration of our financial position, our union contract, we're currently working the police contract, then we're circling back to the fire again. We have to try to get the money, and hopefully we'll be successful.
I do want to say a couple things on that. I do think it's going to increase our staffing for a while, and if things don't go the way we want to go, we still have to keep that staff.
Right.
And, you know, I'm trying to go the other way with staffing, and in that regard, we keep talking about trying to make up this shortfall and different methods, and I talked to you very briefly about this, and but you know, Pinellas County implemented a program whereby, and no one's disputing that if someone's having a heart attack or someone's having a this or something having a that, what they call them the ALS1 and ALS2 responses, that we don't want fire rescue to be the ones on the scene with all the great equipment they've got in the trucks to keep the person alive, get them to the stabilized, get them to the hospital, and hopefully save their life. But when I was in your office and we talked about different types of services calls that are made, there's a very large number of calls which are classified as BLS. Is that correct?
Yes.
That only require basic life support, broken legs, slip and fall, these types of things which do not require all the bells and whistles that you take out with the first thing to help the heart attack victim. I mean, that's kind of, broken leg is not a heart attack. And Pinellas County implemented a program whereby they essentially had a joint venture with certain, and up there, we have the luxury in Palm Beach County, we have 4 different new fire services. The county is just, as you know, contracted with 4 fire companies for transport in between hospitals. So we have a lot of private ambulance services here. I meant to say ambulance services. They contracted in order to save money and not use firefighters, in order to save money, they've contracted with private ambulance services to do the responses for what are called the basic, the BLS services, the broken legs, these type of things. Why is that not one of the options? Why is door number 3, so to speak, not one of the options? Because it will certainly save money. You need less personnel on them. We know that. We know it's not, people don't union. They're not paying into the pension. They're not become obligations to the pension. It's contractual. Why isn't that even being considered?
Well, in my presentation back here in March, I did touch on privatization.
Yep. I didn't go anywhere. I agree.
That is an issue related to the COPCN that is issued to us by the county. Private ambulances in this county have a very specified use. Some ancillary 911 response, but primarily the interfacility type work.
Right, I mentioned that, yeah.
And the other reason, to be quite frank with you, Mr. Mayor, is I do not know one municipality that I work with, even Pinellas County. I have a lot of friends who are fire chiefs in Pinellas County, and there is constant compliance issues that they routinely have to address. And I do not know one municipality that I have direct working knowledge of that have privatized any portion of their EMS and had successful outcomes and aren't sitting back in the chamber like this looking at how do we reestablish our municipal funded EMS service. Thirdly, what I will tell you is you already have that model existing today in your system with the 3-person staffing. As I've stated before, we have reduced the number of dual apparatus responses since the inception of the 3-person rescue staffing. Best way I can give you the analogy, we are Henry Fords of the EMS business, We are no longer taking the car with pushers and pullers across the assembly line. We created an assembly line to turn those ambulances, to get them quick and to get patients from the scene to the hospital. We already have that efficiencies using our staff, which give us more control. So that's why it hasn't been pushed. One, there's a political legal question that we have to answer between the city of Delray Beach, our COPCN, and the county. 2, 30 years of experience, I haven't seen a lot of successful outcomes. And 3, we have a highly efficient workforce utilization rate.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to get, I mean, it's almost like suggesting that these ambulance companies don't have the competence to do this sort of thing when we know that they're the same paramedics as everybody else. I mean, we're talking about broken legs.
I will tell you, there is a quality difference.
Well,
There is a quality
I would
difference.
expect
I
you
think
would
if
say
we
that.
There
direct,
is absolutely a quality difference.
if we're directing you to go to the SAFER grant, though, you'll bring that back in front of us if we get it for acceptance for a vote. Is that correct, City Attorney? That would come back in front of us. So we're just directing him to do the application.
If they complete the application, if we win,
Right.
that will come back to you.
Exactly. So
So we don't
I
have, if
see-
we receive it, do we don't have to accept it?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
So
Chief-
we're
Chief-
just giving him the
Because I really want to
direction.
examine the personnel, the ongoing personnel obligations.
Right, but with the 2 weeks, excuse me, Mr. Market,
You're good.
only 2 weeks, we might as well have him do it. We might not even get it. It may not be something we even need to further discuss.
Just a quick question to follow up on something you said. So now for most ambulance calls, we send the ambulance, but we don't send the fire truck with it?
About 37% of the time, we are sending one unit to any call we receive.
That's a good change.
That has been a very good change for the
That's a good
city of
change.
And I
Delray
applaud you
Beach.
for that. I
Yeah,
know you
that's
worked
a
very
good
hard
change.
to do that.
And that leads to a multitude of other things for the city. There's less risk management for our staff, less risk management for our commuters. That's one of the many reasons I support this three-person
Yeah,
rescue
wear and
model.
tear in the truck, fuel, I mean, all that stuff.
Instead of sending a $2.1 million asset
Yeah,
frequently to low acuity calls, we're sending a $575,000
I
asset.
applaud you for that change. That's really positive.
And I can't take credit for it. My team that's existed that implemented this three-person staffing is the people that you give credit to.
Okay, that's great.
Yep.
So what I would like to have Chief Martin do at this time is to continue the dialogue regarding adjustment to fire suppression coverage as a potential option, if you will, touch on that a little bit so that the commission can have that clarity and background.
Well, to clarify, it does sound like you have consensus to move forward with the SAFER grant at this point, just to put a pin in that.
Yes, there is. Okay, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, given the consensus, the deadline is actually Thursday, July 3rd, 2025, and
p.m.
we will be updating the City Commission regular meeting agenda for next week, June 17th, to include a formal authorization of the SAFER grant submission. So I would like to give Chief Martin and his team throughout the day tomorrow to go ahead and prepare that in light of the consensus being offered at this time, because again, that's why I felt it was productive to have this dialogue in a public setting as part of this workshop meeting so that clarity can be achieved, number one, as well as commission having the ability to offer consensus in this regard. So, Mr. Martin, we talked about this possibility at the beginning of the weekend of having that authorization or consensus. Therefore, a formal request by the City Commission to be made available June 17, 2025 for formal submission of the SAFER grant. So thank you.
Just a quick question. Do we have a grant writer on staff or do we go outside and hire a grant writer?
No, you have a number of existing staff who do not specialize in grant writing. We work with our federal lobbyists,
Okay.
state lobbyists to assist us in specific details, and that's been a discussion and debate for quite some time, but that's where we are.
We do have staff members that
I
actually
said that.
specialize.
You did.
Like Missy Barletto's gotten us so much money, it's mind-blowing. So.
Correct. A number of staff have been very
It's sort of-
successful,
yeah.
but
No.
do we have a designated
No, we don't.
grant? No, we do not. And
Right.
quite frankly, this is a good approach because we've had a tremendous track record of success, to Commissioner Cassell's point.
Woohoo.
So
And in my experience, writing grants is an art. I mean, it is hard work.
it is, and I know that all too well myself. So
Chief
SAFER
Martin?
grant, June 17th, Madam City Clerk, add that as a placeholder for that agenda item. Normally that would be published this evening, which it still will. However, it will be amended in the next day or two to feature the SAFER grant application authorization via your June 17, 2025 meeting. Otherwise, Chief Martin, fire suppression coverage, if you can articulate for the commission what that might look like in light of where we are.
Okay, so this is option 4 that I was asked to prepare and present a little bit to you. So this is a risk-based recommendation, which all of you are business leaders in your respective areas. You know what risk means. It's the best of two bad choices, but this is the best one. Fire suppression coverage, day-to-day, the risk to an average citizen, I would classify that as low to moderate. Not having sufficient number of emergency medical service resources, ambulances on the road, given our demographics, I would say the risk is moderate to high. So there is a feasibility, there is the feasibility of considering shutting down a fire suppression unit, which would then allow us to reallocate those resources to the rescue unit, maintaining minimum fire services by having at least a 2-person search and rescue crew with limited to no suppression capabilities in a zone of the city, but we would maintain our constant state of readiness with emergency medical services by essentially reducing the capability in one portion of our program areas. We would reallocate our special operations unit as well as our EMS supervisor to whatever zone we were selecting. That way we have immediate on-scene outside command presence, and with the addition of a water can for an extinguishing agent, if there was an immediate life threat and conditions warranted, 2 people could rapidly deploy to save a life. Again, I would highlight to you that this option doesn't come without risk. Our firefighters are highly trained, highly skilled. They're trained to enter into environments without a hose line directly behind them and to conduct primary search and rescue. There is a risk of ISO rating impacts. And, of course, anytime we're removing or impacting service delivery to the citizens, there's the obvious risk of constituent dissatisfaction. So that concludes my presentation on the 4th option.
Question.
And of course, obviously, whatever unit we were going to bring back would be based on our statistical analysis. We'd bring back our recommendations to the city manager to confer with all of you.
Aren't the vast, by a multitude percentage-wise, 85% really dealing with life safety? EMS type stuff, as opposed to?
Yes, sir. Like most every fire department in the state of Florida and in the country, the vast majority of our service needs are emergency medical services.
Okay.
So we're ISO 1 rated here in Delray
ISO
Beach?
1, yes, sir.
Which is the highest rating you can get?
Yes, sir.
And you think that could be compromised if we?
I think any of the changes, if we reduce our to a 3-2 model,
You're right.
that impacts our effective response force, which is consideration for ISO. It may have impacts to our automatic aid agreements in Palm Beach County. I already have follow-up meetings scheduled with Palm Beach County to see how we're going to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
So all of those factors, no matter what we do, will potentially impact that ISO rating.
So I recall just maybe a little over a year ago, before we even lost the Highland Beach station, there being discussions about us, just based on Delray's population growth, needing an additional fire station in Delray Beach in the next few years. Were you aware of any of those conversations and any of those projections?
I have been apprised, obviously, by my staff. It's something we're watching. Again, it comes back to, I think, the true meaningful discussion, Commissioner, if I'm being honest with you, is what we've discussed with Mr. Moore and all of you once before, is to truly get your handle around fire safety costs. The commission needs to formally commission a community risk assessment to understand what the community's risks are as the fiduciaries, as the elected body, commission a strategic plan for the fire rescue department, and then formally adopt a standards and cover document. But it needs to be done here with the authority having jurisdiction. So you're the voice of the constituents. You need to understand the risk as well as I do. But yes, I am aware of that potential need in the next 3 to 5 years.
Got it. So, no, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with all of that. But it does feel like a lot of what we as a commission have been doing in regards to some of this stuff lately has been very short-term thinking. It's frankly, we're in triage. We're dealing with problems, some of which have been self-inflicted, in my opinion. We need to step back and do some long-term planning and long-term thinking. And so, to me, even having a conversation about reducing our staff, when we know that in the next few years, we're going to need probably a lot more staff just to keep up with population growth. And we know costs are going to go up. So I just feel like we need to be thinking more long-term as a commission. We need to be thinking in those terms, not just how do we get through the next budget cycle? How do we just barely cover the spread on our budget every single time? That's my issue right now, is that we're not thinking long-term. And those are the conversations I'd also like to be having concurrently with the ones that you're talking about, because we obviously need to have a firm understanding of the risk profile that some of these decisions are going to create. I'll tell you right now, there's no universe where I'm going to be in favor of reducing our suppression coverage or changing our staffing model, period. Because that, to me, we heard about it. We had a whole presentation in March about this, and we unanimously agreed. All of us here sat here and agreed. After you made a really solid presentation, we heard from a whole bunch of staff that that's a huge step backwards in terms of what everyone else is doing, and that it will directly impact the safety of our residents. So to me, there's absolutely no universe where we should even be considering any of that. We have to be considering our financial options in terms of how are we going to pay for this going forward.
I want to ask you something about that ISO rating. And I can read you what it says, but it relates to fire suppression. It doesn't relate to ambulance calls. You suggested that doing these ambulances and all this is somehow going to affect the ISO rating. It's not even one of the factors in coming up with an ISO rating. It's fire suppression and the response time to a fire suppression event. I'm happy to quote the regulations from your union in Washington, D.C., what it means.
First of all, I'm not a union member.
Well,
Okay,
I don't.
I'm not a union member. Secondly, ISO does reference NFPA 1710 for
It
the
does.
deployment, which if you look at NFPA 1710, NFPA 1710 sets an effective response force. When I first came here, I was asked to
I'm talking
provide
about the
you-
rating. Talking about
The
the rating.
rating incorporates what a city's effective response force is and takes into consideration mutual aid agreements, automatic aid agreements to get to that effective response force.
When you go through the different categories, we don't have to have that conversation. I'm delighted to with you another time. But you know, the whole concept that ISO rating saves people in the city money is. I know what
Yeah,
it says.
no, that's a different conversation. I
Not one,
wanna make-
not one insurance company gives a benefit, has given benefits to homeowners in the city of Delray Beach. Not one insurance company, including the state mandated insurances for hurricane, have given any benefit at all to residential properties in their homeowners insurance, which is going up, as everyone loves to point out. You know, we don't mind about just spending money without regard to what the taxpayers are going to have at home just by increased insurance costs. The commercial don't get it automatically either. It's a privately negotiated thing. So, respectfully, ratings are important, efficiencies are important, but notwithstanding the stuff that we just talked about here, that would not drop us below 90%, and we would still have a top rating.
Mr. Mayor, the conversation on what the meaning of ISO 1 it truly means and the cost savings. I have my opinions. I have not been able. I was a fire marshal for 10 years, so I wrote ISO PPC ratings several times and had these conversations. And I cannot get a consensus opinion even from the State Insurance Commission on what ISO means. I can tell you that they package information and sell it.
I'm just-
Much better metrics is what you were part of with accreditation. I do agree what it means to the average citizen in the city of Delray Beach on their insurance bill. I can't tell you whether it impacts it or not.
50% of the ISO rating is access to water.
Yes, sir.
50%.
Yes, sir.
Almost every community in Florida gets that one.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if they all do, but they may not in
Your
the middle
rural
of the state.
areas.
But, so, I mean, anyway, I'm only referencing because you try to make it as a point that we need to be worried about that. I am not worried about that rating. Just not. We'll still get a number one rating anyway, based on everything that you said. Go ahead.
That's all I have.
So what I'd like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is go to the final slide and talk a little bit about what the next steps are, followed by additional dialogue, feedback from the commission before we adjourn this evening. So the first, from left to right, July 1st, property appraiser certifies taxable values to all taxing authorities. Right before that, there's actually an upcoming next step, and that is to provide updated granularity budget worksheets to the City Commission. My interest was to provide you all this background, this
it's supposed to be.
feedback this information so that you can be squared away in that regard. Given the presentation offered by both Henry Dakowitz and myself, there's some additional information that you all need to have available at your disposal as we prepare for early July to offer aggregate proposed balanced budget consideration. So the Department of Finance is being asked to assemble that information between Wednesday, June 11 and Thursday, June 12. That will likewise be forwarded to you. And our principal focus is the general fund. That's the basis of this preliminary dialogue today, and therefore that information will be provided to you all. So a little bit less material than your initial 500-page document because, of course, we included the enterprise funds and all the other non-general fund related activity in that particular material, but it will be a fair amount of information, as I think you all should have that so as to get comfortable as well as to maintain our environment of granularity. I mentioned July 1. July 8th, of course, the Office of the City Manager will formally recommend a proposed balanced budget consideration for fiscal year 2025-2026. The following week, July 15th, your City Commission schedule for the month of July are July 8th, July 15th. The city will be in position to adopt a tentative millage rate. Many of you will recall this experience a year ago. As the City of Delray Beach administratively will get back into the mode of a town hall engagement, July 24, 2025, we will offer an opportunity for a discussion on the budget. So City Manager Terrence R. Moore, along with Chief Financial Officer Henry Dakowitz, will likewise be host for that town hall engagement so that we can share with the community via live streaming and recording what is anticipated for the upcoming fiscal year as a result of the recommended balanced budget consideration. September 2nd, tentative first hearing. September 16th, second hearing on the millage and budget. And of course, the new fiscal year to begin October 1, 2025. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are. And again, given the information having been shared today by way of presentation material as well as oral dialogue, I'd love to hear your additional thoughts in terms of expectations so that the Office of the City Manager, the Department of Finance, and all other divisions of municipal operations can be productive in meeting expectations of the City Commission as we come back to you all with a proposal via the July 8, 2025 workshop meeting, 4 o'clock.
I have a question.
Ma'am.
So, are you prepared to give us another scenario? The scenario that was presented today was based on the current millage rate. And as Commissioner Cassell said earlier, we usually get some options. Will there be this budget presented to us with another option?
The options that are presented today are based on assumptions. The assumption being the
All of it
existing
has to be
millage rate.
assumption. Got it.
So the other consideration we did make available after the thorough dialogue and analysis we provided for the 3-3 position as we transition to 2472, because as far as I'm concerned, all other matters are generally straightforward, is a millage rate adjustment from 5.9063 to 6.0039. And that would be the only consideration to address that particular concern. And of course, there'll be opportunities to tweak revenues and expenditures, particularly expenditures, to make sure we maintain all other opportunities as well. So that is the calculation, but of course, in the month of July, there will be some ability to review expectations with regards to the millage rate as well.
So this 5% reduction that the departments are being asked to, will we get a breakdown of what these departments will be giving up?
That will be included as part of the granularity information to be distributed by this week. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I have a quick question,
Go
if I
ahead,
could.
yeah.
Henry, just for my knowledge, how does our millage rate compare to neighboring communities? And do you have any insight as to what other communities, because we're not a unicorn here, everybody's got the same issues for the most part. Are other communities?
We are a unicorn.
I see people,
What's that?
I see people
We're all
not
saying
agreeing
no.
with your premise.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's okay. I'm controversial.
I disagree that we're the only, that others are struggling with this exact issue. For the research I did, No one else except for one other city in the entire state adopted a millage or a rollback rate, which was, I think, Dunedin, Florida.
But that's not what I was referring to. I'm saying I just wanted to get a feel for what other millage rates look like in other cities to see if we're way low or way high or where we are.
Commissioner Merkin, I might be qualified to respond if I may.
Amen.
Thank you. It varies, quite frankly. And the major reason millage rates vary from municipality to municipality, because of what I've talked about several times, is the fact that a number of municipalities have public safety assessments, fire assessments, and other opportunities that they levy that support the general fund. The general fund in Delray Beach, Florida, is supported by ad valorem resources. That's really about it. There are some additional fees that come in, and you'll see a lot of this in future proposed budget processes. We break it down pretty well. Nominal expenses, charges here and there that may come into it, but the lion's share of your general fund outcome is property taxes, which is the case in most other municipalities. However, other fees, other assessments, other outcomes exist in other municipalities, such is the case in our communities to the north of us and to the south of us. So in many regards, analytically, ladies and gentlemen, or econometrically, it's a bit of an unfair comparison. People would try to demonstrate to myself, Mr. Dakowitz, and others, hey, Boca Raton millage rate is X. Why is Delray Beach's millage rates perceived to be higher? Well, you have much higher property values than Boca Raton, number one. Therefore, the actual dollar amount paid in that community in terms of property taxes towards the city's portion, is higher than that of paid in Delray Beach in just about every regard, number one. Number two, taking a look at their general fund allocation structure, there are multiple assessments and other fees that go into it. Delray Beach does not have that, which further underscores the point we attempted to make with respect to the EMS structure 3-2 versus 3-3. That is how that happens. That is why that occurs. So therefore, it varies.
Okay.
But by and large, many other municipalities, and I'll circulate something for you, ladies and gentlemen, as it relates to fire assessment.
I do think it's fair to say that Delray Beach has a much heavier reliance on our property taxes than a lot of other communities do. I think it's about 80%. That's much higher than what Boca Raton has.
No.
Respectfully, the shopping centers and the shopping centers alone in Boca Raton generate the revenues that generate unbelievable. We're 16 square miles. Let's be honest here. We're 16.
I'm talking about
square
ratio,
miles. We don't have big shopping centers. We don't have a lot of land.
And that contributes to the
Boynton Beach has
difference.
all that stuff west. They have tremendous.
Agreed.
We have
but
deliberately not wanted shopping centers. We have deliberately
And
not wanted tall buildings.
I'm not advocating that we
Well,
but
I'm
my
just saying.
point is that we are extremely reliant on our property taxes to
Primarily
fund
residential-
municipal functions here more so than other communities.
Primarily residential property owners.
Correct.
Which is why I'm so careful about what their taxes. Commercial, I feel
We
different.
don't have any way to offset that whenever we lower it, is my point. If
Well, it's
80% of our
It's called cost savings. It's called budgeting. And to say that there's not 5% available in those departments after the huge growth they've had over this period of years is just silly.
Let's just talk about the reality of this just for a quick minute, and then I'll wrap up because I know everyone wants to leave. But the reality is, well, I do, but the reality is the cost of everything has gone up substantially. We know that the cost of our staffing is going to go up with that, right? And so to then offset, our property values went up too, but then to offset what we're getting from those property value increases, we have just kneecapped ourselves. And every single department head, the whole procession came in and practically begged us not to go with this 5.9063 millage rate. All of this that we're going through right now was super predictable. The city manager recommended a rate of 6.0611, which is still actually higher than the one that you just recommended today, 6.0039.
That's a potential consideration.
Which would ostensibly fill the gap that we're seeing right now
And
with our fire department staffing. But all of this was predictable. Every person came
I'm
in.
going to disagree with you, but that's
I
fine.
mean,
we want
literally, we were warned for these
Make your point.
these exact things that every staff department head is saying right now. The whole list of
I've never known a
of
staff
things
to
are going to
say
be
no.
lacking.
I've never known a staff to say I can cut myself 5% until they're told to.
But they told us they were going to have to make reductions, and now they're saying that we have to make those exact reductions. Maybe we should just listen to our staff. We still could have lowered our millage.
I'm listening to the taxpayers.
We've barely
At the end of the
saved the
day-
taxpayers any money with this. The cost savings are de minimis.
You know-
It's like maybe $100 or $200
Respectfully,
average.
well, let's not, we'll
We've been down this
We'll
road.
have ample time to fight about this or discuss this in July.
Yeah.
But I will just say to you, you said, well, it's only worth $60 or $80.
Yeah.
So
So
you have
a year.
So you have a $5 million bad expenditure. It's okay because it's only costing everybody $60.
What's the bad
I'm not
expenditure?
saying-
Our police
I'm
and
saying,
fire
When
department?
you save money, you look at it. You have to look at. We'll talk.
We're not saving any money. Is my point, Mayor. We can still lower the millage without compromising our service.
Do you
And
have any idea?
we
the
had a
amount of
recommendation to do that.
Any idea the amount of property that's going to come online this year that we're not accounting for yet? Because these are all from January.
I think they said 8.5 million.
Are we going
We
to offset
calculated
that
every
as
bit.
well?
That's just our,
So-
our
That's
numbers
already
next year.
factored.
We're gonna have revenues
Mayor, if
next
I
year.
may though, the part fundamentally, listen, we don't have an assessment. So all our property taxes pay for a lot because our revenues don't increase. Our local business taxes have not been going up year to year, but by a small amount. Our sales and use tax, it's used for something else, even though that's substantially gone up. It's capital improvement. The utilities is used for something specific, franchise fees. Our property tax pays for our operating. And when we have these contracts, and I'm not to say the union contracts, but when we have the union contracts and they used to go up 2 million, then the next contract they go up 4 million, and then they go up 20 million. We can't keep up because our property revenue last year or the year before it was 10 million. This year it's 8.5. But if you go back historically, it was 3 to 5 million increase. Yet our expenses were 6 million, 7 million, 10 million, 11. 4 years ago, I sat up here and said
We
our
outpaced them
expenses
1.5
are
150%.
outpacing
We
our
were outpaced by
revenues
expenses.
every single year by a greater and greater number. And so the only thing we can do, I don't disagree, we have to figure out a way, but we're hitting our residents so hard already. Their utilities went up, their sanitation went up, they're getting hit left,
Oh, yeah,
right,
I mean, their water's
parking
going to
and
go up this year
everything.
substantially.
So-
Their insurance is going up this year substantially.
I'm saying
Their,
to
their
you-
cost of living is going up this year substantially.
And it's no disrespect to any of
And we-
our unions, but when we're in these contracts, this is the long-term ripple effect, because those are the non-negotiables. So then we take the departments that are negotiable, and we're pulling 5% out of your department. I mean, by the way, and your department's insurance went up 35%. So you're really
Different number.
losing 40% in there.
But it's our job to keep up with the
I understand, and I'm
market.
telling you that I agree
It's our
that we
job to
have
do
to
that.
look at the numbers because Mr. Moore and Mr. Dakowitz, it's no offense to you because you were directed, coming in here and just giving us staying the same, we all know it's not going to work.
We're obviously just establishing a baseline and in a framework for how we're going to approach this conversation as we go. My point is, we have to acknowledge that this rollback rate was a mistake so we can rectify it going forward. I'm
Well,
not saying we have to go through the roof with our millage. We just need to set it to a reasonable level.
I look at, they're already, you've said it yourself, already everybody, if we kept the millage the exact same, everybody's still going to pay 8% more in taxes. So, and that seems to be okay with everybody. We just keep,
It's
without
not
regard to saying to the
it's not
departments,
our-
you got to 5%, but we're going to hit our taxpayers for 8%.
our core functions as a city are provide clean water, provide public safety.
Right.
Right? It nowhere is in our core functions that we have to flatten taxes. If we're doing that at the expense of our residents' safety, we're not doing our job up here, in my
I think
opinion.
we need to be, I have to tell you, everyone says, you got to run things like a business. We're not monetizing our own assets. We're not monetizing.
Who said run it like a business? I want to run it like a
No,
government.
I'm just saying. No, I think we need to monetize our assets. We have parking lots that people should be
I agree
paying
with that.
for.
I agree with that.
We have fees that we charge people that should be being paid for. We have events that we're sponsoring that we shouldn't be paying for.
That's a
I will
separate
tell you,
issue, but I agree with you.
The little old lady or little old man who lives there in Lake Ida in an apartment who's not going to. Well, I mean, I have actually a list of all the special events, which we're not going to discuss
There's
today.
over 200, and we should all have that list. I think I asked for it so
But
that we can look at it.
I put this myself, but
Please,
we
Mr.
sponsor we sponsor like a surfing contest, and we sponsor
how
a
come
this
I don't have
contest
that?
and a that contest, and
Where
I
did
mean,
you
why?
get that?
That's part of my conclusion commentary.
Why is the
I have
city
it.
paying for things that
Oh.
should have
I
private
don't
sponsors?
like when
And I
people
include in
have
that the
things
St.
and everyone
Patrick's Day
doesn't.
parade.
honestly.
Why
I
is
just
the city
assembled
paying for
this
St.
shortly.
Patrick's Day?
Oh,
It's okay.
okay.
This was
Thank you.
this afternoon. This was a few minutes before the meeting, Commissioner.
Understood. Thanks.
So
I'd
that's
Oh,
on
no,
its
I just
way.
got-
So
I
if I
only
can
asked you
conclude,
before.
I'll be able to get that to
I
you.
feel like I never have any.
I only asked him at 3 o'clock, so.
No, but I made a commitment for everybody. That's in my
Oh, I know, you
possession.
made, I know,
So it's
I
not
happen
just
to-
for one person.
And
I
would
did
you
not do
forward
that.
out the information with respect to the SAFER grant that the chief gave you so that we can sort of review that in consideration of the next meeting where we might be approving it?
Yes, ma'am. As I committed when Chief Martin was before the podium, I've asked him to circulate that information electronically between now and perhaps tomorrow morning, but knowing your work ethic, you will circulate that information to the City Commission regarding the SAFER grant. Copy me, copy the city attorney, copy Mr. Dakowitz, and we go from there. Yes, ma'am.
But to conclude one thing, what the chief said is accurate in his email. The understanding is we need an additional $10 million just to cover the increase in the fire budget required under the 2472 contract for just this year. And just to make the point, we're getting an additional 8.5 million in revenues. So we're not even getting enough revenues to cover the cost of that contract for this year. So I think this is going to involve a lot. We need to figure out how, and Mr. Long's correct, it can't be year to year. But the problem is, these contracts are swallowing up all the money we have and leaving nothing for the other departments to function. And I would like the list of the jobs that we're cutting in those departments, the vacancies, so that we know that the staff is okay. Are these, if you have vacancies and you're cutting them, are the directors okay in that department? Can they function?
What do you mean by cutting them? Like
You have
eliminating them
vacancies that
permanently?
we're not going to fill. So we're basically
No,
temporarily
we're simply
holding
managing. That's just the result of vacancy rates that occur. We're not eliminating the actual positions.
We're not filling the position that's vacant.
Because
holding it
of
vacant.
attrition, they'll be held vacant for
There's one
a
that was
fixed amount of
attrition and
time.
there was one vacancies.
Yeah, I understand
Correct. Right. Sure.
Very well. So, Mr. Dakowitz, as part of our granularity piece, the follow-up information, let's be sure to include the criteria that Commissioner Cassell outlined so that we can be clear in that regard. So, going forward, ladies and gentlemen, for the July 8th engagement, we will be in position to address options because during the July 15th meeting, the ability to address the military consideration will be made available. So I do have one question for each of the elected officials here publicly. Deputy Vice Mayor Burns.
Do I have the floor, Chad? Just, it needs
may
to
have
ask-
the floor.
I just wanted to ask a question about this, the 2472, 24, the 2 and the 3. Is that a decision of the commission or is that an administrative decision that has been made?
Contract.
That's part of the contract?
The
That's part of the budget?
2472 transition is the result of the collective bargaining agreement that was approved by the City Commission back in 2023. So the agreement is in place between October 1, 2023 to September 30th, 2026. However, effective October 1, 2025 of that respective collective bargaining agreement governs the transition from 2448 to 2472. Therefore, that shift structure will take effect October 1st, 2025, the result of an authorization having been made by the commission at the time 2 years ago.
And the decision of whether we have two or 3 on the truck was made at that time? Is that part of the,
That's separate and apart from that. However,
that's what I'm asking you about?
Yes, ma'am.
Whether the change from 3 to 2, when is that decision? Whose decision is that? Is
let me
that
talk a little bit about
administrative?
that.
Administrative, or is that commission?
It's a little bit of both, quite frankly. It's a little bit of both, quite frankly, and if you would bear with me, please. And that was the basis of our commentary along these lines. The 3-3 position, that's been the way it's operated forever.
Right.
That's long existed here in the city of Delray Beach, as well as many other municipalities throughout South Florida, unlike other parts of the country. So the 3-3 structure and to transition to 2472 involves additional human resources and likewise additional costs. It involves the city commission because it does play into what financial considerations you can make available by way of millage rate adjustments or whatever the case might be. In the case of Delray Beach at this particular point in time, in addition to the efficiencies and operations we've been able to identify in the fire rescue department myself working with Chief Martin, Henry Dakowitz, et cetera, the net additional need is about $1.4 million.
Correct. And was that included in Chief Martin's proposed budget ask? Was that included in his ask? to
His
have the
initial
3?
request did take under consideration 2472 and 33, based on the discussions we had back in March. Thus, the direction to identify efficiencies in operations within the Fire Rescue Department to help fund that particular difference. However, further analysis indicated that an additional $1.4 million will have to be identified someplace. I became a bit excited after engaging with other municipalities, benchmarking to ascertain how it is that they're able to pay for this. And the answer, a big part of the answer, is the assessments and other opportunities they have that Delray Beach does not have. So therefore, listening to the City Commission, and one of my pointed questions, quite frankly, is your feelings about the 3-3 position on EMS so that I can come back with options as part of the July 8th City Commission workshop in which we unveil a formal proposed budget. So my interest today is to hear from the body on an individual basis what your expectations are in that regard. In light of all the information having been shared today, in light of the presentations and discussions that took place even prior to the day, so that we can get to that place. Bottom line, Deputy Vice Mayor, $1.4 million has to be determined if there's an expectation that we position ourselves for 2472 and 33. That's what has to happen. So
I
if
would
there's an interest in that regard by at least the majority of you all, I will come back with recommendations to help
Clarification, the-
outline what that looks like.
The 2472 is more like a $10 million expense. The 3-3, you're talking the difference between 3-3 and 3-2 is the
I am.
1.4 million, right?
Correct.
That's not a combined number. That's
Correct.
Okay,
They're
just
distinct.
to clarify
Fair
for
enough,
the
just to clear.
listeners.
1.4, the difference
Yes.
between 3-3 and 3-2, given the efficiencies and savings we've been able to identify, that's what's needed.
But have we, let me just ask, have we looked at what revenues we could be generated by doing paid parking? I mean, I don't see in any of the stuff I've seen where we're talking about, even though we had a parking study done a few years ago, which outlined this beautiful program of how the city can make all this money with their parking.
Mayor, they went up on the parking right before we got elected, almost.
I'm talking about the lot behind Hands. I'm talking
Some
about.
of those lots are those lots.
I'm not
they're
talking about the
employee
paid. I'm not
lots.
talking about. They're not employee lots.
But are there
I mean, you keep
lots
saying about
people
we need
use
to
in
do
the
this for
city?
the employees. I will tell you that the restaurants in downtown Boca Raton have not lost one patron
We don't
because
have
they made
any
everything
parking
paid
for
parking. around it.
employees in the city, in this very small city.
I
We
am
just
ta-
need to be mindful. Can we, if
I'm
you want to
mindful
put
of
this
the
on an
residents.
agenda to have a discussion?
That's the July 8th regular meeting as
Because
well.
I
this
am mindful of the
concerns me
residents.
when we're looking for revenue in ways that could be impactful to our businesses. That concerns me. I just want to make sure we have
You
all
do
the
what
info.
Boca did. Boca didn't lose any of the restaurants. They have, trust me, they have more restaurants
It's
down there
a
than we
very
do.
different. You drive to a Boca restaurant and they have a giant parking lot because it's Boca. Delray, all of our
depending on where you
restaurants are
I
downtown.
will just say, and there's ways to address that.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So the,
So we can talk about
the
that at
restaurant
that
buys a
meeting.
pass for the person, they buy it, the city gets your revenue. We have to monetize our assets. You can't keep putting
I
everything
don't
on the taxpayer.
disagree with you, but I don't think just pulling the parking lots that are currently being used. You can't go to the business now and say, "Hey, you've been here for 10
Sure
years.
you
Buy
can.
the
You give
pass."
them a 3-month thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may
Sure
please.
you can.
Mr. Mayor, if I may please.
Yes.
Thank you. So I will host individual discussions with you all over the next couple of weeks regarding parking dynamics and respective considerations, and we anticipate an update regarding possibilities during the July 8th regular City Commission meeting as well.
So you need direction on the 1.433 right now from everybody, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor.
We're talking about what?
The $1.4 million being allocated from the budget.
I
for
think
the
we're gonna have to
3-3.
find savings in all the departments. I
But
think
are you?
there's more
He's
money to be
asking.
made.
Do you want
I
to
wanna
keep the
analyze what we can
3-3
make
on?
parking.
The question he's asking is 3-3 or 3-2. That's what he's trying to
Actually,
ask.
if I may,
Yes.
to word it, my interest is consensus on 3-3. I will employ ingenuity to come back with considerations as to what that might look like, striking the balances across the board. That's the consensus I would have to have from the commission at this point in time so that we can continue to do the work in preparation for July 8th. That's what I have to have at this point in time. And if all of you all can speak accordingly, we can go to work from there.
I would start
have
if
my
you like.
consensus for
I
February.
would listen. I would love to save money any way we can, but I want to support the chief. He gave us an email. He was very specific on what he thinks are his needs. It's his department. It's his needs. I've been very impressed with what you've done thus far to look for cost savings for our residents, and so I will support you on your request. Thank you.
So
Yeah, I think,
Burns
look, the
supported
3-3, I
on
think
the
where there's
request as
consent,
well.
I mean, are we pretty much consensus for the 3-3? I mean, I'm not gonna, if the chief says
I've
it,
always been.
it's always a
3-3,
safe, if,
yes.
you know, I'm not gonna second guess that,
So,
that.
Given that consensus, ladies and
Now you have to
gentlemen,
figure out how to pay for it.
I'm all set. I'll come up with considerations as part of the July 8th formal proposed budget consideration, followed by July 15th and the remainder of the proposed budget calendar for fiscal year 2025-2026. So we continue to do the good work,
See, Charlie,
myself
I
and
can't
Mr.
be convinced.
Dakowitz, and we'll take it from there. So on that note, I appreciate that, and nothing further formally.
Commissioner comments, Commissioner Casal.
I would like to
Mayor,
thank.
sorry, we have public comments on the
Oh, I'm
agenda.
very
Oh, do
sorry.
we have public comments?
The meeting is now open to the public for any people that wish to speak on any matter that is, that you feel you want to talk about. You've got 3 minutes.
I'll be brief. Charlie Stravino, 3631 Lowson Boulevard, out in Sherwood Park. I really wasn't going to come up and speak. I think the last minute you guys moved in the right direction. This is a no-brainer to keep 3 people on this rescue truck. The impacts of not doing that, system-wide, the impacts to the county, the service, and it was all identified in the workshop. The most ultimate thing you can do here is the patient care. And that is grossly affected, and I can personally tell you a story how that has happened to me, riding on a rescue truck with 2 people. So you're making the right choice. It comes at a cost, there's no doubt, but this is not the place to try and save money, okay? And with that, I would implore you to support your public safety in this city. I realize it costs money, okay? It costs me money, but you gotta be at a point in life here, are we supportive of our public safety departments or aren't we? And yeah, it costs money, but there's gotta be a commitment going forward. On one hand, we're talking about reducing staffing, and on the other hand, we're talking about growing fire stations. Like, that comes at a cost. You've got to decide what you want in the city. And it does become cost prohibitive at some point, and residents, if they think it's too expensive, they move, okay? There's only so much you can do with what you're, you know, with what the finances are, and I appreciate you trying to find efficiencies, and I think Mr. Moore, Chief Martin, has done a wonderful job, but you've got to allow your department heads to manage.
Absolutely.
You've got to allow that. And I'm to the point where look, the grant, that's a Hail Mary, quite frankly. It really is. Is it a good option? Absolutely. I don't think it's realistic. The redeployment of some units, that's kind of I feel firmly enough that that would be the way to go if you can't do it financially. Like, that's how important it is to maintain 3 people on the rescue truck. So with that said, I'm happy that you guys have made the correct choice with keeping 3 on there. I hope you find the money to be able to do it, but I appreciate your commitment to that.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Seeing no other members of the public,
Yeah.
we now go to commission, the public comment is closed, we now go to commissioner comments.
Thank you. I was going to say thank you to Mr. Hunter for stepping up for the city and agreeing to be our interim chief of police. Congratulations, and thank you for your willingness to serve us. It's a little rough right now, but we appreciate you. Thank you.
Commissioner Burns.
Same thing. Congratulations to interim Chief Hunter, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask at this time of Mr. Moore. The process is, and maybe I'll save it for the next one, but I wanted to ask in terms of and I know that personnel decision falls under the authority of the city manager, but can you give us what is the planned process for selecting the next permanent chief? of police?
To be determined, quite frankly, I'll visit with you all individually as I outline a trajectory. However, publicly, the present focus is we do what we can to support Interim Chief of Police Hunter in his efforts to bring a presence in this regard, and therefore I'll be outlining that as time progresses soon.
Okay, I'll save my next question until after our private conversation. Thank you.
Commissioner Marker.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. First of all, congratulations to Chief Hunter. Really appreciate you stepping up at a time where we really need you. We need you, and I'm very thankful that you've agreed to that. So thank you. A shout out to Mr. Moore, Chief Martin, and Mr. Dakowitz. This was a really good meeting today. I don't have a lot of government experience. I'm a corporate guy, and this is what we did just as well. We asked our managers to go out and try to find some efficiencies in the budget, and they've done it. We got to make sure that we didn't cut too hard in areas. That's always a risk. And I agree with the comments Rob made earlier. I think that we do need to look longer term at what we're doing. It's tough when you're managing year to year to year to year. That's a pretty hard way to run a ship. So I think your comments were spot on.
Thank you.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd actually like to thank my colleagues up here tonight, because this is a contentious issue, and I'm glad that we at least arrived at the conclusion and agreed, like the gentleman said, to do the right thing in terms of the 3-3. I think it's super important, and I'm glad, even though we're all coming from sort of different perspectives on it, we were able to come together on that. I think it's super important. But also, I do want to thank Daryl Hunter for stepping into the breach right now. We really appreciate it, and I hope we have a long future with you here in this position. And I also want to thank our outgoing Chief Major, who did an incredible job here for 29 years. And I'd like to give a longer sort of thing about that when I'm more prepared at the next meeting. But it would be remiss not to mention the dedication and commitment that he's had with us for so long. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of points I want to ask. First is, I was going to save this for next week, but we may as well start thinking about it. We want to get started with this visions process. So in the next couple of meetings or so, we up here need to choose the 5 people that we want to serve on this steering committee. We are allowed to take it from the list of people that have asked to do it, or you can choose your own. But we need to get started. So do you have Terrence, do you have a timeline on that for us?
Sure. So as I discussed during the May 20th City Commission meeting, I believe I offered a staff and consultant trajectory as to what that might look like. So if the City Commission would be in position either July 8th, probably July 15th would be appropriate, a little bit over a month, so that y'all can get your thoughts together to make an appointment. So if it's okay with the entire City Commission to create an agenda item for the July 15th meeting, so that the City Commission can make their appointments. You don't have to follow an application process, as I've clarified during the May 20th meeting. You all have the ability and capacity to appoint, I believe, 5 members each.
Right.
To get to that place. So if
So we have
that's
consensus
appropriate.
for that, July 15th?
July 15th regular meeting, Madam City Clerk, we'll work collaboratively as we always do, but that will be the direction in that regard.
You get 5. There's a list of people that have applied. I'll probably look at the list mostly, but if there's someone that you feel, you have the inherent power to choose your board members, the board members. So you get 5. Each one of us will get 5, and then we're gonna, we'll figure out with the city manager, with the steering committee. We have to have some staff involved. We have to have other people involved, because help us guide us to where we're supposed to.
Are there going to be? I'm sure this will come up when we talk about, but are there going to be requirements in terms of them living within city limits, or how do we establish?
I think we said that they had to live within the city, not just
Okay.
have a bit. They had to be a resident.
Okay.
Because this is a visioning for the residents.
Yep.
That was, I think, one of the
What
things.
about property owners? Because I have someone in mind who lives outside of this. She lives west of Military.
guess they
but
both-
she owns
Yeah,
a
I
lot
think
of property here
we
in
can
the
work
city.
out those details on
Okay.
how we'll try to do that maybe the next meeting, to work out whether a property owner is. I guess, and I have no.
She's one of the largest property owners in Delaware.
Yeah, I have no. I mean, they should. I think a property owner probably is fine, but we'll work that out with those details. Charlie, I'm going to say one thing to you. There was a guy in New Hampshire about 20 years ago who said, if you can't afford your taxes, move. He lost his next election quite handily. And that's a state that doesn't have an income tax, and everything is property tax. And so I am keeping that in mind. So that's why I'm telling you, if people can't afford their taxes, it's the government to try to help them. Because we have a lot of neighborhoods here that are already getting pushed out. All right? And I, for one, am looking at these neighborhoods are going to have $60 to $80 to $90 increases in their water bill per month next year. They're already living very thinly. And so I'm going to disagree with that statement. I'm going to disagree with it. The next thing I'm going to say is I want to talk a bit about the DDA. And I'm not going to talk about the meeting yesterday with that kind of out of control where they start weighing in on what the city manager does, what we do, all the contracts we enter into. I want to focus on one part of this meeting that is concerning to me. We had given advice previously that the DDA would come to us with a recommendation on what they thought the millage should be. But they've taken it upon themselves to say, no, this is not a recommendation. They have adopted the millage rate. Okay. Two problems with that. If you read the statute, it says they can adopt millage rates. But the reason they haven't done that in the past is because they have relied on the city commission to, in its public notices, to include as part of the proposed millage, the proposed DDA millage. So it was all part of the public notice meeting requirements. The DDA has adopted something without any public, they're required to have two public, if you're going to do it on your own, if you want to be independent, you want to do it on your own, you have to have two public meetings to discuss your millage. They have not complied with the statute. Therefore, this adoption is invalid, and it's going to put them into the position, if they don't make a quick correction going back saying, oh, we didn't mean to adopt it, we're just giving you a recommendation. If they're going to stick with that, then they haven't met the statutory requirement. They will end up with no millage this year. And I'm very serious.
Can we, hold on. I left the meeting early. I don't know
You're
what
welcome to
happened.
listen to the meeting. Let me finish. This is my time. Let me finish. I give everyone their time.
Should we be talking about them when we're
Oh,
complaining
yes, I'm
that
talking
they're
to them so
talking
they
about
know
us?
what the position is, that they have not complied with the law. And anybody who lives in that district, this is not, someone brought this up to me. I didn't come up with this on my own.
I just wonder if
There's
we
a
should all
property owner
get
there
informed
that
and
says,
then
I
have a
can now
discussion.
challenge this. Yep, you're actually right, you can.
So are you saying we're challenging their millage?
If you adopt a millage that's invalidly, that is not
They have to
adopted.
come, I think they know they have to come before us. They do a
Oh,
presentation and we give them a vote.
No, listen to the meeting. It's
Okay, I
final.
haven't.
It's
That's why I'm having
adopted.
a hard time with the
Adoption
discussion.
is not a recommendation. They've previously made recommendations of what they would like and had us, the board, sit here and have two public notices on what the proposed millage would be, which would be the city rate and their rate. We voted on both, as you recall, in two public meetings.
No, we always vote on it.
Correct.
Yeah.
They have not done that.
I didn't
I'm
watch.
just pointing that out. It's.
What are you asking? Should
It's
we
not-
watch it
It's
and
not my
discuss
board.
it?
It's not my board. And if somebody challenges them and takes their mill away from them because they didn't do it properly,
Well, I mean, I imagine they're scheduled to come before us for the approval of their
excuse
millage
me,
at some
that's
point.
it. It's adopted. Understand that this is a
Can I
legal
ask
description.
this?
This is a
Can you-
legal description. It
Do you
has
want,
been
can you
adopted.
speak to this? I did not watch that portion of the meeting. I'm sorry. So I don't really,
They've taken the position that they set their own millage. They referenced a charter provision that allows them to do that.
their attorney allowed that, attorney?
Oh, they're allowed to do that, but you got to comply with the statute
So
to do it.
I emailed you last night. I put an example from Fort Lauderdale. The
Uh-huh.
city of Fort Lauderdale's DDA, they have two actual public hearings where they debate the millage, they make their recommendation, and they actually set it, and then when it goes to the city commission, it's to levy the millage.
Okay, let me
So-
continue with my remarks, okay? Because this is a matter of law, and I checked this out. I mean, they adopted it. They just deliberately said, this is not a recommendation. We have the say, we are adopting it. And the motion was to adopt, fine. So it's final, they said. Okay, which means three things, really. First of all, if it's final, I can't adjust it without going back to the DDA, because they adopted it. It's in the minutes. Secondly, they proudly said, oh, our property values went up 11% this year. Our assessments are going up 11%. So all this 75% of the people that pay that tax live in residences. You know
Right.
this.
Well,
we
I
have this.
think it's less than 75 per day, but it's a fair amount.
It's a big.
I agree.
65%. Okay, whatever the number
whatever.
is that pay it. They've had no say in the adoption of that millage, which is why we have public meetings to do it, because then they technically have a say.
Right.
They have not had no public meetings, so the rate they want their 1%, which is going to be an 11% increase
Yeah.
of the CRA tax, whatever we're going to call it. Right?
DDA, not
DDA.
CRA.
Excuse me, DDA.
But I would
Thank
argue
you.
that
Well,
we didn't
which is
know-
interesting, because when we did the rollback, and they proudly said we didn't, so you notice we didn't do the rollback, we gave them the 1% last year, the DDA, because the CRA actually had to deal with our rollback. So it affected every other tax-paying thing. So you have a taxing body of unelected people who didn't follow the laws of a public notice in their meeting, and they're proudly walking around saying that, I'm just saying,
No, but we
I am
used
not
to
going to
be-
adopt a millage rate that was adopted
No,
that
I don't
that
think you
violated
should.
the law.
I agree with you 100% on that. But we always understood, and I was speaking to the city attorney years ago, that it was like 1% by statute, and it kind of just sort of went through. They did a presentation. We approved it. At one point, Mr. Frankel did not want to, and we were discussing, is the rate amenable? But here's there are partners. They represent the businesses.
Not the point.
Let's
Commissioner
just
Casal,
have our city
if you've
attorney
had your
call
say,
them
I understand what you think,
and
but let me just
discuss
say,
it.
when the CRA 1% was, the DDA was adopted, the 1% 20 years ago, 1995 was adopted. The Second Amendment was what, 1993 or 95? Did the 1%? I would suggest to you that the property values were very different back then, and so now the money's coming in for doing. If you read what the purposes of a DDA is, it's helped to develop your downtown and help you develop all this, and they've done a great job. But I
Should
would
we
suggest to you.
direct our staff to send them a letter saying that was not
Oh, I'm not
appropriate?
directing. I'm not. I don't.
We could do that through consensus. What do you want to
I'm
get?
just saying
what are we
the law
trying
is.
to get out of the
They've got attorneys.
conversation?
They want to be an independent agency. Let them be independent.
Well-
I'm just saying I'm not going to adopt, and we're not going to be allowed to adopt something that was illegally done.
I guess I don't think anybody would dispute that with you, but I think they're still going to have to go through the same
I'm just-
procedure of
that's-
coming up to us and
And I would
doing the
also, and I
presentation and us
didn't
voting.
really want to bring this part up, but I think maybe it's time to consider an adjustment to whether they should be still getting 1%, because I don't think anybody can really say it with a straight face that downtown needs to be redeveloped. Downtown needs development help. Really? Anyone with a straight face? So I think that needs to be seriously considered as to whether or not we want to go back and adjust whether or not they should be entitled to 1%. Maybe 0.5% is right. There are some who are arguing we don't need them at all. I'm not going that far. Because the millage the money that they bring in with that 1% is being, if you read what they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to do in their mandate, I would suggest to you that some of the activities upon which taxpayers' money is being spent without
We've asked them to do
consultation
some
is
of those
probably
things.
stretched.
We've sort of asked them to do some of those things. So
Look,
we're in
this is
part
the-
we're at fault.
I
Listen, I'm not.
I
I don't.
agree
I'm not
with you.
saying.
We should have asked them, but we didn't. But that doesn't mean you can't correct a wrong. So that's my opinion.
Could I touch on a separate DDA issue for a quick second? Because I think it reminded me of it, and I think it's something I'd like to get consensus on for a future agenda, which is the process in which the DDA is included in applications going forward changed administratively to where it is now optional for applicants to go before the DDA instead of mandatory. Given that maybe they're not technically an advisory board, but we do appoint them and they act as a kind of a quasi-advisory board, and typically any change like that on one of our advisory boards would be a discussion among us. And I think that's a substantial change. I think it's something that we should at least have a discussion about up here.
I don't
I'd like
understand
to.
why they made the change. I didn't oppose to it because I don't know why.
I didn't know about it until it happened.
I learned about it, but I think there were only certain applications that they didn't process that were kind of more of administrative and ministerial, which they technically would have had to bring to us for approval, which didn't make any sense of our time. And so,
Sure, maybe it's an efficiency and maybe it's the right call.
no, they're right.
Point is, I don't know, and I'd love to just have more education on that. And
I think we should schedule Anthea to come up to one of our next meetings to discuss
It will not be June 17th, but sometime
No,
probably in
I'm
July.
not rushing.
Right,
So that's
We'll
fine.
Mayor-
do the workshop
That's
on-
fine.
We'll do a workshop tomorrow.
City Attorney, Mayor, should we send them a letter letting them know that that was improper? From
Okay.
just answered that? Do-
Anyway,
Should
Mr.
we
Mayor, I
send
have
them
one
a
item.
letter to let them know that that was improper or not?
sorry?
Should we be sending a letter to the DDA letting them know that that?
I'm just saying from my point of view that I believe that it was improperly done, and there's no way that I can adopt in this, I'm not gonna use my public meeting to discuss millage rates for something that they should have done by statute because they insisted they wanted to do it on their own. Their actions have consequences. They can, if you wanna warn them, great.
I
it's
think I'm
probably the
pretty sure
smart
they
thing to do.
know. I'm just gonna say, pretty sure everybody knows right now. I just don't. I feel like, is there a
Oh, I'm
polite
sure
way
they're
for
already
us?
calling each other.
But is it
Can we
is it a polite thing for us to do? Should we just send them
Sure.
a nice letter?
Please advise.
No, I gotta weigh in on that. I don't think that's escalating this right out of the saddle. I
So
don't-
not telling them and having them hear this meeting rather than a polite letter that says, by the way, this
How
is the
about we meet
procedure?
with how about we meet with Al and have the dialogue
The
before
city would have
Al
to do
was
that.
told,
before we escalate this though.
Al was told.
Because they have been a valuable partner to us over the years.
That's
Well,
what
with
I
their,
said.
with the amount of money they're bringing in,
Well-
they're no doubt.
Yeah, they have been, So
I've seen them
I don't
move
want to escalate this and have an organization that isn't working for the citizens of Delray because they are doing a lot of good work. Admittedly, we hit a hiccup here, but I think we can fix it.
Well, we can discuss, I think the city attorney should just, I'm gonna just recommend that I'm not having any meetings. Everybody was advised beforehand, and they said, they know what they said, and with all due respect to the mayor, I'm doing this. Okay, fine.
They said that in a meeting with all due respect to
Oh,
the
yeah.
mayor?
I disagree with the mayor. Yeah, okay, fine, disagree. I don't care. I'm giving them advice. So they'll do what they
I'll
like.
have to go watch the meeting and see
So-
what's what.
You wanna send them a letter that they, can we do, at least
I
send
just
a letter
think
saying,
there's
oh,
a
by the
polite,
way, we
Mayor,
can't bring this up in
no
our meeting because you
disrespect, but
violated the law?
I think it's right to be polite, and sending a nice letter versus talking about them. Our biggest complaint about them
Okay,
was the
be
way they were
polite.
talking about our staff.
I mean, could we just have them come in, like, and actually have a conversation about it instead of, like, letters
Commissioner
back and
Burns is
forth?
next.
I just.
Why don't we just talk to
Did
them?
everybody finish? I just wanted to say, I forgot in my comments to say congratulations to our hometown hero, Coco Golf.
Oh, yes.
for-
Oh, well, finally, somebody with
Yes.
something sensible to say.
Yes, for that Roland Garros championship. And I want to propose that we have some discussion later on about a proclamation for a Coco Golf Day.
I think we need
I
to do
don't know
certainly
what
something
day
for
that
the
would
French
be.
Open winner, yes. I think
Yes,
that's an
because
easy
of
lift.
all of her accomplishments. So just want to get that on the
I
road.
think I can get the DDA behind that one.
Coco Golf Day. So thank you. That was
Coco
it.
Golf Proclamation,
I'm done.
Coco Golf Day, I'm going to call that consensus. But Mr. Mayor, I have one item, if I may, please.
I'm sorry?
I have one item, if
Oh,
I may,
I'm sorry.
please.
Yes, you're recognized.
Thank you. And that is in preparation for next Tuesday's workshop meeting. You have a regular meeting, but you have a workshop meeting, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, to provide an opportunity for the City Commission to finalize its input relative to the education element of the comprehensive plan. And I wish to advise publicly that there will not be any formal staff presentations. We've done enough of those. This is simply your opportunity to provide your feedback and direction. I will therefore, for good measure, ask staff sometime tomorrow to forward you all the comprehensive plan material and data so that you can adequately prepare accordingly. That is your meeting. No formal staff presentation. Of course, will be available for specific questions that may be raised as a result of your dialogue, but that is your time, 4 o'clock until 5 o'clock when the regular meeting begins. So with that, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, I yield and I thank you for your time.